you. So you're coming in. Just okay. Hello there. Okay. So I know we have one more registered participant, so we'll give them another minute or two. And if not, we'll just jump right into it and get started. All right. So it's 1:05 now, so we're going to jump in. So a little idea of how we're going to go through this. I've got my PowerPoint of the seminar that we'll go through. After I have gone through all of my stuff, I'll have Dan talk a little bit about being a former applicant and someone that has received the grant and any insight he might have, things that I might not think of right away outside of the logical how you apply for the grant. And then if you have any questions, we can go through those. So my name is Caitlin Costello. I am the grants coordinator for Genesee Valley Council on the Arts, and I work with the Decentralization Grant Program. I work with artists in Livingston and Monroe counties. If you are from another counties, there are programs within those other counties, and it would be best to reach out to those individuals. Most of the rules will be the same, but there will be some things that will change from location to location. And you'll find that as the application goes through and we talk more about it, that it might be better to reach out to those people. If you have any questions during this, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and later on we will get to those. I just want to go through the seminar as quickly as possible without having too many interruptions. So if you have any questions, just drop them right there. And if you have any little ones, be it human or fur balls that appear at any time, don't worry about it. I'm sure mine will appear at some time as well. There we go. So in the seminar, we're going to talk about the different types of grants that we offer, different resources and tips for writing a grant before getting into the specifics of the Genesee Valley Council on the Arts Grants. So there's two main types of grants, which are monetary and non-monetary. The monetary grants have restricted, unrestricted, and emergency grants. We've been seeing a lot of these going around lately with COVID-19. You've probably seen lots of things that have been shared on Facebook or through emails. And GVCA's DECA grant is a monetary grant, so you'll receive a monetary stipend. Non-monetary grants include residency programs, art studio programs, and access, which can include equipment training and apprenticeship programs. Some points to consider when you're applying for a grant is where you are with your current art practice. What do you want to do in the future, and what are the needs to possibly reach that goal that you have? Now, there are many different sources for grants. Like I said, we've been seeing a lot of different things pop up on Facebook and through emails from the state and local governments. A few places that you can look specifically for those grants outside of GVCA would be the National Endowment for the Arts, or the NEA, the National Endowment for the Humanities, New York State Council on the Arts, or NYSCA, the Foundation Center and the New York Foundation on the Arts, among lots of others. And I would highly recommend that you shop around and try different things. Our grant might not be the best one for you, but we always would encourage you to apply. Some points to consider when you are applying for the grant would be the type of grant that you're applying for, be it monetary or otherwise, and what you need from it. The eligibility requirements that it has and whether or not you meet those requirements. The size of the grant and how much does the average recipient receive and how many people usually apply. For example, for our grants in Monroe County, 62% of those that apply usually receive funding, and the average amount for the last year was $2,700. For Livingston County, about 57% of people are approved, and the average amount that they receive is around $1,800. There are some grants that receive more or less, and this is the average across all three grant types that we offer. You want to look into how often does this program run. For example, GVCA only offers grants once a year. Other programs will offer it multiple times a year, and for some grants you only can qualify once every few years. So that's definitely something to also look into and consider around your project goals. You want to look at what the deadlines are and can you get the required information? Oop, Eric is here. Let's see. What the deadlines are and can you get the required information needed before the deadline, as well as write a well-rounded application before that deadline. Another thing would be looking at the turnaround time. Does the timeline of the grant and how it is distributed work well with the project that you are planning on doing? If, for example, GVCA, you have to do it within 1 year. If you're not expecting to have the program done for a year and a half, that's not going to fit the timeline. You want to look into who is giving you the money and do they have a good reputation. You don't want to fall into the trap of where you don't really know that much about the program and you have issues. So really do thorough research into who you're applying to. And then also look at the past recipients. Who has been funded in the past? Can you see parallels between what you want to create and what has been funded in the past? Or is your thing something so crazy that it doesn't line up with the heart of the company or grant you're applying for? So some tips on applications. Make sure you read all the guidelines and follow all the instructions. You'd be really surprised how many people miss important rules or bits of it that can make your application null. So really make sure that you read all of the details and all the guidelines. When I got the job last year, I went through and highlighted all those really close details to make sure that when I was going through the applications that those bits were hit. And ask for clarification when needed. Questions that you might have will probably be questions that other people have. If you bring that information forward, it can also help us to make sure that the program is running smoothly and to help that process in the future. Most applications that you'll come across will have 3 different components: the narrative, the project budget, and any supporting and supplemental materials. So we're going to break down those 3 different sections now. So a project narrative is a written explanation of your proposed project. Some things to consider are your qualifications to complete the project. And if it's something that you're just learning to do, you might not be the best person for that, but that's something you need to look at. The project timeline. Can you feasibly complete the project within the year that GVCA has? That will be different for other grants. How will you market your project to reach the public? Who is your target audience and what are your expected outcomes for this project? Do you expect to have a certain number of audience members? How will you estimate that? And finally, how will you evaluate the project and whether or not it was successful? These are all aspects that will be required as part of the project narrative. The project budget. So we're going to go through some of these terminology that we find on budgets commonly. So the project budget is a detailed itinerary of any and all anticipated expenses, income and in-kind donations that will be associated with your project. So breaking down some of the terminology that is on the budget. Personal expenses would be anyone you hire for the project, such as teachers, assistants, artists, things like that is a personnel people. Non-personnel would be space rental, travel, any advertising costs, social media, things like that, print costs. And then remaining operating expenses would be supplies, material, and equipment rental. And going forward, this will also include PPE. Any earned income would be money your project directly generates. Ticket sales, any fundraisers, merchandise sales, things like that. Unearned or contributed income would be money your project will receive from donations or other grants, or possibly money you yourself contribute to your project. And in-kind donations are anything that is donated that you wouldn't normally have, or that you would normally have to pay for. These could be goods or services, and they have to be listed at realistic market value. For example, if you are in partnership with a theater and the theater agrees that they will give you the space for 3 nights and it normally would be a rental of $300, that has to be listed on your budget. In kind does not count towards the overall budget on the application though. It's just something that we like to see to make sure that all the numbers are adding up and make sense. Excuse me. And the supporting materials and supplemental materials are any additional items that will help to evaluate your project, the qualifications, and proof of eligibility. This includes any artists' resumes and CVs, which could include yourself, any artist samples, which includes recorded audio, video, pieces created directly in the past by the artists, or sheet music, anything like that to show the artistic credibility of the person. This will include the proof of residency of the person, as well as lesson plans, which is going to be a new thing for the Arts and Education Grant. So now that we've covered some of the basics of applying for a grant, we're going to go into more specific information in regards to the decentralization program, which I'm going to call the DEC program from now on because decentralization is a very long word. So some of the points that we're going to be covering today include NYSCA and the decentralization or DEC program, the eligibility requirements for our grants, the 3 funding categories, the application process, and I will also be showing you our new application, and the grant review and notification process. So New York State Council on the Arts, or NYSCA, has a mission which is to preserve and expand the rich and diverse cultural resources that are and will be the heritage of all New Yorkers, so past and present and future. NYSCA achieves its mission through its core grant-making activities, which includes the decentralization program, along with many other things on their website beyond state and local partnerships. So if you find over the years that our program is a bit too small for you, NYSCA has pages and pages of grants that are available. So now we're going to get into eligibility. Specifically with NYSCA. NYSCA is a tricky beast to work with. GVCA gets our money directly from New York State. So working with NYSCA grantees or people that circumvent the DEC program and go straight to New York State can be tricky and can be considered double dipping depending on how you work with them. If you have any questions about NYSCA, I would definitely have a separate conversation with you as it can be confusing. The basic mindset is you cannot directly work with NYSCA and have them benefit from it, as it would be double dipping. New this year, which hasn't been in the past, if you are doing, say, a performance with a NYSCA group and you are using a theater that usually gets NYSCA funding, you can work with them. They just cannot get any ticket sales, things like that from you, but they can now list you on their website as an upcoming performance. In the past, that wasn't available. But you can hire or book a NYSCA grantee as you are getting money from them. They cannot get money from you. Confusing. That one is one that we do by case basis to help. I do get a list of everyone that receives a NYSCA grant in the year. So that helps a lot with that. Sorry, I just lost my place a little bit. So what can the decentralization or DEC program fund? This can be anything from artistic fees, marketing and publicity cost, space and rental, travel for artists to and from locations, administrative expenses, and this year we're going to be including more with the PPE, and supplies, but you cannot get something that would be more than $1,000. So for example, if you are working on renting lights, they cannot be permanent lights and they cannot be more than $1,000. As it says in the second bullet there, examples: camera, lighting equipment, subscriptions associated with virtual programming, and training to utilize these tools. So virtual audiences do count we're in a world where we're having a lot of Zoom calls. So if you need to update your Zoom membership, this would be something that could fall under. Things we will not fund: direct New York State agencies and departments, no Department of Labor or anything like that. Public or private colleges, universities, public or private schools, or parochial schools. This also includes homeschools. I did have a couple questions on that last year. Arts and ed programs do not fund the school directly, they fund a program, so that's where that falls under that. We don't fund startup costs to establish a new organization or the purchase of permanent equipment. We also don't do scholarships or awards or cash prizes, galas, fundraisers, single events, things like that, food or student projects. So if you are applying as a student, unfortunately, you will be denied directly. So what are our three funding categories? We have the Community Arts Grant, the Individual Artists Grant, and the Arts and Education. All three are open to many different possibilities. Some of these include one-man shows from things we funded in the past year: a one-man show, a storytelling summer reading program, dances, compositions, concerts of both vocal and instrumental categories, research for a play and a stage reading, music lessons for students, and crafts night at nursing homes, and much more. Applicants can submit up to 3 different things, so I could submit up to 3 different applications, but they couldn't total more than $5,000. So community arts grants have to be community-based. The public must have some sort of involvement in the development and the implementation of the program. It has to be open to the public so everybody or anybody could walk up and attend the event. And it has to have some sort of community benefit and target an underserved population. So how will your project serve to uplift the community? Will it bring awareness to a topic, or will it bring resources to a community? Those are different things that can be thought of when working on your narrative. There's been a slight change to the match requirement that was there in the past. Prior to this, it was 75% of the project could be funded. Now it is up to 80%. We do still require a 20% match. So if your project is for $1,000, we can fund up to $800 of those dollars, but you still need to be able to show and cover $200. This is just so we can see that you are having some sort of income and you are able to show support from the community for your project. So eligibility would be nonprofits, specifically 501c3, local government entities that are a registered chartered town or village, and individuals partnering with a fiscal sponsor. Wrong page. Okay. I have a whole paper dedicated to fiscal sponsorship, so if you have any questions outside of what is on here, please feel free to reach out and I can share that with you to make sure that any questions you have are answered. The basic idea of if you need a fiscal sponsor is if you are an individual applying for a community arts or arts and education program and you are not a nonprofit entity, you will need a fiscal sponsor. And this sponsor will make sure that you are getting all of your paperwork in on time. They will be the one that the check is cut to, and they will distribute the money to you. It just acts as another entity to make sure that all bases are covered. Going into the individual artist grant, this is for our individual artists or one-man entity or woman entities that want to create pieces of art. Like the community arts program, it still needs to engage with the community and have some sort of exhibition or performance or something that shows the community what they've been working on. Some things that we've had have been a gallery exhibition, Writing a play and doing a one-man show. We have someone that's doing a puppet show, and they were using the money to pay a composer for their project, things like that. New this year is we are able to expand the money offered. In the past, we have only been able to fund a flat $2,500, and within it, we've only been able to fund 4 individuals. Going forward, we will still have limitations of how much money we are able to distribute, but we will be able to fund more than 4 people within that $1,000 to $2,500 range. Applicants must be 18 years or older and cannot be a student is the main requirement. And the projects you're applying for must take place in your place of residence or your county of residence. Projects will not be awarded for, or projects cannot be awarded if they do not have a community element. For example, if you're doing a series of paintings, but you're foreseeing it taking up to 2 years for you to do, and the exhibition is not part of it, that wouldn't be funded, things like that. And if you received an IA grant in the last 2 years, you will not be funded. For example, anybody that was funded this year cannot apply for 2021. Moving on to our last grant, it is our Arts and Education Grant. This supports pre-K through 12. Pre-K is new this year. We're adding that program, which I'm personally really excited for, to see what is created for our little creatures throughout the 2 counties. And these have to be community-based learning experiences. This year we had a composition program that was going to run with 6th graders, and we had 2 different steel band programs. We have music lessons. There was a CD that was being created by songs the students had written, all sorts of things like that. The project has to have at least 3 hands-on learning experiences. Also in this program is up for adults too, so that would be where our arts and craft nights for adults in community centers and nursing home falls under. So we've had that, and it has to be a closed group, for example, a class. And it has to be the same set of students. So this can't be open to, it can be open to a rec center, but it has to be like a closed group of specific students. So you have to be able to show that you will have the same group. And it has to involve the school faculty in some way. You can't just be someone that comes in and does a program and then leaves. There has to be some sort of integration within the school day. Like the community arts grants, we are upping the amount that we can cover, but again, we still need that 20% cash contribution from the group. So teaching artists and nonprofits are eligible for this. We've had many groups where a professor or a teacher comes in and works with the group, that sort of thing. The things that will not fund is things outside of Monroe or Livingston County and standalone projects. So going on a field trip to the Science Museum, as awesome as that would be, that's not something we can fund. Or single performances, things like that. It has to be, you can have the performance, but there has to be something leading up to it to do the education. So how do you apply for our grants? Where do we go? So our application is going to be all online like it has in the past. I will show you it in just a second because we do have a different application than we have in the past, and there are some things that are different. I personally think it will streamline things for people and make it a lot easier, but there are some things that will come up, I am sure. The application will be available on July 20th. We wanted to get through the first couple seminars and make sure people had information before beginning the application process. The review deadline, so if you are applying from Livingston County, in order to get your application reviewed by me or Deb, you need to have it completed by August 27th. And for Monroe County, it is September 24th. After those dates, I will not be reviewing them until the submitted date. Just makes it easier with the flow of the application process. Some new things that will come up with our program will be editing. You can edit the program after you have submitted it, but you will need to request that from me, and I will give you permission through the program we are using. You will be able to save it. It's a lot easier. I know we had a lot of issues last year with the website we were using where people would save it and they would get a link and then that link wouldn't work. That's been completely taken care of. That should not be an issue anymore. If it does happen, please let me know immediately and I will get in contact with the company that we are running through. This year, with this new application, the timeline is a hard deadline. For Livingston County, that will be 4 p.m. on September 17th. If you are still in the program working at 4:04, it will not submit. 4 o'clock, we're done. I will be able to email people that are in the process. I won't be able to see who it is until it is fully submitted, but I will be able to give nudges to encourage you to finish. But if it's not submitted by that time, it's done. And for Monroe County, that is the third Thursday, which is October 15th. It seems really early, but that's just how the calendar falls out this year. So I'm going to show you the application now. Let me get to that page. So we're using a program called SUPPLEMENTAL this year. And I just have the Livingston County one up. It's the exact same for Monroe. You will just go into whichever county you are from. And you'll see that the first question here is what are you applying for, similar to last year. But when you apply, it will bring up different questions. For example, if I select the individual artist, I will have certain programs or questions come up that won't be there for arts and education, things like that. So you might look at it without clicking anything at first and think it's really short. It will get longer once you start clicking things. Some other new things is there is going to be questions on it this year about your demographic. This is information that will solely be for me within the office to keep track of things. So some things will be your social security or employee identification number, which can be found on the tax papers of the company we're applying with. The gender, your ethnicity is something that we really want to track this year and make sure we are reaching a diverse group of individuals and in the future move forward to reach people that we might not be reaching. And that's what this information is for. Your highest degree, things like that, only information for me for tracking. One question that we had some trouble with last year that we've made a completely separate thing is, have you applied for the DEC grant versus NYSCA? We had some confusion about that, so we just made it two completely separate questions to try to eliminate those issues. What are other things that were new? I think that was everything. We do have questions, which we'll get to stuff about COVID in a little bit. We do have some questions that are directly up around COVID and your ability to implement the program. So everything will be done through this, your budget request, everything should be able to upload. And as you can see, there is many different file types that you will be able to do. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember what the minimum file size is, but I will make sure that that information is listed on here for when you do apply. So let's go back into here. We touched on that. Okay. So going into the grant review process, some things that we're going to look into are the quality of the artistic samples that you have submitted in that section. So is your art well done? Do you present it in a way that is at a level with others in your field? Your credentials presented for you and or others that will be involved, and any new initiatives, especially from people that have applied in the past, how are you improving on what you've done before? Nope. Let me go back. So the community benefit, as I said, how is it serving the underserved population? Who are you working with? Do they have good credentials? Things like that. Your feasibility for how clear you are going to implement the plan, how clear and concise your budget is, and any notes you have around COVID-19. That will be something we will be looking at this year. So applications will be reviewed by me once they come through. And after I have done that review, I will be sending them to a panel of artists from the local area who are directly involved with the community. These individuals will go over the application and they will decide where your application ranks amongst the others and whether or not you should receive funding and how much. From there, I will take it to my board of directors and they will either approve or disapprove it. And after that, and around early mid-December, usually around the Christmas break, I will send notifications to everyone whether or not you have received a grant and the amount. This will also be when I will send out the initial contracts for the grants. Once I have received your contract and you have accepted your grant, we will have a grant award ceremony, usually around February or early March in the following year, so 2021. So the grantee is responsible for making sure things are done in a timely manner. So the project must be completed within the year of 2021. You'll see there's an asterisk. We'll get to that in a second. You have to provide any publicity, and there is a statement that has to be listed on all publicity along with a logo. Any unspent funds must be returned to GVCA. Any and all funds. So we highly encourage you when you're creating your budget to go nickel and dime any and all expenses. And grantees must submit a final report within 30 days of their project being completed. Now, back to that asterisk, we do know with COVID, things are being moved around. Things from this year are being pushed to next year. All sorts of things are happening. So there is the possibility for an extension. However, you need to prove to me and to my director why you need that extension, and it has to be very clear. Similar thing is happening this year. We're hoping that we don't have to use this extension next year, but we know it's there. This extension should not be planned into your application. We would like it to happen within 2021, but we know things might happen and change. Around COVID, virtual audiences can be included in your attendance tracking. We've seen some really, really good outcomes of this year, and it's something that we want to include to make sure that art is still facilitated within the area. If you did receive a grant this year, any changes or restrictions, things like that, will not affect your eligibility for next year. However, if you have to extend into next year, you can apply. The projects have to be completely separate. For example, if I am running a summer music program, I have to have a completely different theme for the next summer music program that I also want to run at the same time. So different music, different composers, things like that. Maybe a different audience. Maybe the one you had before was for the elderly population, and this one is more targeted to young kids. Things like that that show they are completely separate. And as I said when I showed you the application, there are going to be questions this year about the feasibility of your program and how you're going to run it. So some tips, which are things that we did briefly cover before. The application guidelines, make sure it actually, and the criteria, make sure it actually makes sense for you, that the award criteria is something that will work for your project. If you need an additional $10,000 for your project, and apply and ask for $5,000, but don't seem to know how you're going to fill in that gap of the additional $5,000, the panel most likely will not fund you because you're application is not clear where you're getting that additional money. So make sure you have submitted all aspects of your application and it is done well. Within language, use language that makes sense for your projects. People can tell when you went through and just used a thesaurus and just filled in words to make it sound good. So use language that is around your project and around the type of art that you're creating. But be thorough and concise and clear. If you are direct, you might not need to use all of the space that's given. But if you go on for sentences and sentences, but don't give concrete information, the panel is going to say it's vague and not thought through and have more questions that you don't have the space to answer. I would highly suggest going through a rough draft. Send it to me, send it to other people in your community that have similar things or have presented before. Some tips that I have from doing presentations in the past: talk out loud. Read through what you have and see if you can find any errors, be it grammar, anything like that, but also, is what you're saying actually making sense? Also, take your project to people that aren't involved in any way, shape, or form, that are not involved in the arts, and present it to them and see what they think, because they're usually a really good way to see holes in the project or issues you have. I do that a lot with my personal writing. I can get so close to my project that I don't see the issues that are there. Another set of eyes is always great. As far as your submitted materials, make sure they are professional. I'd rather see something typed out than handwritten, because some handwriting is not the best, and you want to make sure everything is clear for both myself and my director, as well as the panel. If you have logos and information that should be included, make sure it's there. Make sure your font is readable. Little things like that really add up to making your project look more professional and could be the difference between you receiving and not receiving your grant. And as far as estimates and fees, make sure you're going by industry standard. Even if you generally only hire Sally Susie for 50 bucks, if the industry standard for hiring a lighting designer is 200, make sure you're paying your artist the actual accurate amount. You should be paying your artists. Try to stay local within your project. Closer to home works better. You'll have more impact in your community, and people usually will take to it better. Look at, again, what has been funded in the past and versus what hasn't. And if you have applied in the past, look at that information you got before and see how you can improve your application. And again, I'm always here to help. My email is grants@gvartscouncil.org. And this is our office phone number. I am not currently in the office, but my boss does go in a few times a week. I would say the best way to contact me right now would be to email me. Otherwise, I might not get your phone call for a few days. So now we're going to shift into Dan and Eric talking a little bit about their experience in the past from applying and anything that they might have to say. So I'll let the two of you take over. Oop. I'm not sure. There we go. Stop share. Wasn't sure how to get out of that. So I'm not sure which one of you would like to go first. Oh, Eric, I can't hear you. I see your mouth is moving, but I can't hear you.
Now try this.
There you go.
Okay. Thought I'd let Dan go first.
Well, I would say, well, Caitlin, I think that the presentation was fantastic. I think you covered an awful lot of details that actually some things that I had sort of forgotten, I think. I know Eric and I we do a lot of our own grant writing stuff, and sometimes, just, as you say, you get totally wrapped up in your project and it looks great to you, and then you hand it even to your spouse, and they're like, and my wife would understand what I was talking about. She's like, I don't get it, you know, so that's always good. Have somebody read it. I would say, hi to Deborah, by the way. And, you know, the process is really straightforward. And I think as long as you have whatever your proposal is or whatever your idea is, as long as it's really, you know, carefully thought out and it's clear to you what you want to do and how and what you want funded, then the process itself is a lot easier. Because it sort of falls into place. The other thing, I think, start as early as you can, because there are usually sort of unanticipated bumps, and a lot of times it has something to do with the supplemental information. You know, you're trying to get a CV from somebody that's going to work with you, and they don't, you know, they don't answer their email, or they don't answer their phone, or, you know, and you're scrambling at the last minute to get it done. So I think that's important. And also, if it's your first time doing it, submitting it early to Caitlin is great, because you get some really good feedback. I haven't done that in a long time, but that's a really good idea. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because, you know, sometimes there's a really great question that everybody is thinking about, but nobody wants to ask the question. And then it turns out sometimes that there's like an issue with the form, you know, or there's just some weird little glitch in the or a typo sometimes, even in your, you know, here are the requirements, and it has something like, how could I possibly have that? And it turns out it's wrong. That doesn't happen very often. We wish it would, because sometimes we go, I don't have that requirement. But otherwise, so I think the process is great. You know, it's just have a clear idea in mind and start early, and good luck.
Awesome, thank you. Can't hear you, Eric.
Okay, I think
There
you
we
must
go.
be my $20 headphones. They've got to work. I know they work. So, you know, one thing that really helped me is figuring out what the outcomes are, because for us, we have certain community outcomes, the external ones that we know or expect will benefit our audience. And then we have internal outcomes. It's going to grow our membership. It's going to grow our sponsorship. It's going to grow our donors and, you know, ad sales. There are a lot of ways it will help the group grow internally, and both of those are valid. It just helps to have those outlined and researched a little bit before you start filling in the form, and that is a simple outline set done.
Yeah.
And I'm going to mute my headphones.
Yes, I definitely would suggest like doing a mind map. I personally am a writer outside of things, so having an outline of like, okay, this is my anticipated outcome, but how am I going to get there? Our grant is one that many people come back to year to year to year, but we do really like to see those external outcomes of how are you going to grow? Are you going to get fundraisers from over here? And while it's sad when we see people outgrow our program, we really love it, because that we know that people have learned the tools to grow whatever business or program they have to not need us anymore. And that's really cool to see, even though it's sad that we won't get those applications and see those projects come through our doors. So does anybody have any questions that I can attempt to answer, or any of my speakers can help answer?
Can you hear me or no?
Oh,
Now we can.
sorry, Deb, what was that?
Oh, I was going to ask, when we talked to Debbie before, she wanted us to fill in as many words as we could, but I felt like I kept having to say something over again in a way. I don't think as many words really I had to do, you know. I don't think I could do it with less words. And you kind of made that sound like that.
Yeah, so if I can say something in 10 words versus 50, then that gives me the space to say it a different, continue to go more in depth onto something else. It isn't always about getting all of the characters as much as getting the idea across in a clear way. And that's where talking to other individuals can help, because they can look at it and say, oh, I see what you're trying to say here, but what if you said it in this way? There are some programs online that I use outside of grant writing. For example, I think it's the Hemingway writing app. It actually helps to take your verbiage and says, like, if you're using too many adverbs, or if it's a very redundant run-on sentence, things like that, where it can help you to reword it and it really breaks down what it is. I can look up that program and send it to you if you think that would be beneficial for you.
Yeah, okay.
That's something that I use in fiction, but I've also seen people use it in nonfiction for things like that too. So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah.
I think sometimes it's intimidating when it says, 500 words or less.
Mm-hmm.
And literally you struggle to come up with like 75 good words, and that's enough, and you think, oh my gosh, I need 425 more.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I've tried sometimes, but it doesn't work very well.
Yeah. In the past, I've seen, for example, theater programs where they have gone on and used every single character, but they left out crucial information that left the panel going, but who's going to do X and who's going to do Y? You only have this and this. And you don't even say what show you're going to do, where other people say, okay, it's going to happen this date. This is the director. This is the show. This is where we're getting the actors, da, 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 da. And that's all they need, because they're very clear and concise versus long and sounding fancy and saying, we're going to do this and this and this. That can work. You just have to make sure everything is there. So,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. So, unless anybody has any other questions,
I did have one more.
Oh, of course.
You said something about August 24th. What is that? That's how long we have to talk to you about?
August
everything?
24th is the review deadline. So if you start the application next Monday, I think it's Monday, on July 20th, you'll have until August 27th for Livingston County to submit for review. After that point, it's kind of set in stone. You'll still have time to submit after that deadline, but I won't be giving any feedback on that, because that's when I will start to also get Monroe County applications during that time for review. And it just helps to keep the cycle going, so I don't get bogged down so much in one county that I can't help the other county. And for Monroe County, the review deadline is the week after the Livingston County deadline for final submission. So that's September 24th. Yes, September 24th. And again, at 4 p.m., close of business.
Thank you.
Of course. Anything else? All right. Well,
This was a great day. Thank you so much.
of course.
Yeah,
Again,
thank you.
my email is grants@gvartscouncil.org if you have any questions. And after, like directly after this, I'm going to send out a little exit survey. So any feedback that you have that, excuse me, that you think could be helpful to include for the future, or additional information that you think of that you would like an answer for, that'll be a good way for me to see that information. Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it, especially since this was my first seminar that I've ever run, and it went pretty good, I feel like. So
Yeah.
thank you for your help. So,
Take care. Have a good afternoon.
have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.